All right, so in this lesson, I'm going to review adding and subtracting fractions. So the most important thing to know when you're adding and subtracting fractions is that you must have a common denominator. Must have a common denominator. And that's the bottom number in a fraction. That's the denominator. The top number is called the numerator. So you must have a common denominator. So we look at this first example, add 4/5 plus 3/5. Those have a common denominator. So when you add them, or if you were to subtract them, you keep the denominator the same, and then you add the numerators. So 4 plus 3 is 7. Now, unlike in most of your classes, in algebra, we're actually going to leave these as improper fractions most of the time. But if you wanted to change this into a mixed number, remember, an improper fraction, the numerator is greater than the denominator. So to change this into an improper fraction, what you're going to do is see how many times does 5 go into 7, which is once. You leave the denominator alone, and in the numerator here, you put how much is left over, what's the remainder. So when 5 goes into 7 once, there's 2 remaining. So it'd be 1 2/5. All right, so 5/9 minus 2/9. I don't know why I wrote the 2/9 first, but I did. Again, we already have a common denominator, so the denominator stays the same. 5 minus 2 is 3. This is not improper, but this can be simplified because these have a greatest common factor of 3. And so we want to divide 3 out of each of these to write it in its simplest form, which would be third. All right, so if you got a common denominator, it's much easier. You just add or subtract the numerators. So let's look at one that doesn't have a common denominator. So 3/4 plus 5/6. I'm just going to rewrite this like this. And so to get a common denominator, what you're looking for is the least common multiple of 4 and 6. So the least common multiple of 4 and 6. And if you haven't watched my video on least common multiple and you're not sure how to do that, there should have been a link up in the upper right hand corner. You can go and find that. All right, so least common multiple of 4 and 6 would be 12. So again, what you're doing is you're looking at the multiples of 4 and 6. That means counting by 4, counting by 6. And you're looking for the first number that they have in common. So if I was to count by 4s, 4, 8, 12, count by 6s, you got 6, 12. 12 is the smallest multiple they have in common. So that's what I'm going to use as my common denominator. So to change this 4 into a 12, I need to multiply it by 3. Well, when you're working with fractions, in order to not change the value of the fraction, you have to do the same operation to both the numerator and the denominator. So what I'm really doing is I'm multiplying this by 3/3, which is just 1. So I'm not changing the value, I'm just changing the numerator and denominator. And then on this one, I'm going to multiply the numerator and denominator by 2 to get a denominator of 12. Okay, so I multiply those and I get 9/12 plus 10/12. And now I just add these together. So again, you keep the denominator and you add the numerators. So 9 plus 10 is 19. Those don't have any common factors, so I can't simplify that any further. In fact, 19 is a prime number. Its only factors are 1 and 19. All right, so let's look at subtraction now. So I'm going to show you 2 methods for subtracting this. All right, now keep in mind, if it wasn't a mixed number, you would just do the exact same thing that we did here, right? I did the subtraction there. So what we're looking at here is with mixed numbers. All right, so method 1, and this is my preferred method because this always works and it doesn't have any hiccups in it, whereas method 2 requires you to know a trick. Method 1, the only trick you need to know is how to change these into improper fractions. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to change these into improper fractions, which remember to do that, you multiply these together, and then you add the numerator. So I'm going to multiply and add. I'm going to do 4 times 5 is 20, plus 1 is 21, so that gives me 21 fourths, minus 3 times 3 is 9, plus 2 is 11, 11 thirds. And now I need to get a common denominator. So the least common multiple of 4 and 3 would be 12. So multiply numerator and denominator here by 3, and numerator and denominator here by 4. And what I end up with is 63 twelfths minus 44 twelfths. Keep the denominator, subtract the numerators, so 63 minus 44 is 19. 19 twelfths is an improper fraction, so I'm going to change it into a mixed number. So 12 goes into 19 once, with a remainder of 7, and keep the denominator. So 12 goes into 19 once, and there's 7 left over. All right, so this method always works without any special tricks. Method 2 requires a trick, okay? So let's method. If you learn the trick, method 2 is the easier way to go. So I would encourage you to try to learn this method. So 5 and 1/4 minus 3 and 2/3. So when you're adding or subtracting mixed numbers, instead of changing them to improper, you can actually just subtract the whole number. So 5 minus 3 is 2. Well, first you'd want to get a common denominator. So let's do that. Sorry, jumped ahead of myself. So let's do what we did up here. So I'm going to multiply these by 3. But I'm going to leave this time I'm going to leave these as mixed numbers. So method 2, you don't change them to improper. Sorry, I kind of around that. So we get 5 and 3/12. I don't know what for. Sometimes I write what my eyes see and not what my mouth says. And 3 and 8/12. Okay, so now here's why you have to know a trick. 3 minus 8 is a negative number. You can't take 8 away from 3. So when this happens, you want to make this 3 greater than 8. And the way that you do that is by borrowing from the whole number. What I'm going to do is I'm going to borrow 1 from this whole number, and so it's going to become 4. And that 1 that I borrowed, I want to add to 3/12. So if I want to, I'm going to come over here on the side. If I have 3/12 and I want to add 1 to that, the way that you would do that is by doing 3/12 plus 12/12. 12 over 12 is 1, right? So I'm still adding 1, and now I have a common denominator, so I can add these together. So what I'm going to do is add 12 over 12 to this 3/12. If the denominator, let's say the denominator was 15, then I would add 15 over 15. If the denominator was 8, then I would add 8 over 8. All right, so I'm going to add 12 over 12 to that, and so that's going to become 4 and 15/12, right? This would be 15/12 when I add those together, minus 3 and 8/12. Now I have 15 minus 8, which is a positive number, so that's going to work out. And so now what I'm going to do is take 4 minus 3, that's equal to 1, and 15/12 minus 8/12, which is 7/12. Now, if this number, this 3, had not been smaller than the 8, I wouldn't have had to do this borrow trick. So the only time you have to do this borrow is if this number is smaller than this number. So again, what I always recommend to my students is, I said you should learn this if you can because it's easier, but this method is foolproof. It's always going to work. This method, you got to be careful. You got to watch out for things. All right. So that's it. If I was you, I would back it up and watch me explain this again. And hopefully you'll understand it better the second time if you're still confused. All right. So I hope that was helpful. So give it a like and a subscribe. And feel free to leave me a comment. Until next time.